Hello friends, this is the second tutorial of this C programming language course. In previous tutorial we learned how to write hello world and some sentences, and in this tutorial we will talk about variables. First let me delete this text. We will mark, and like we did in C++, we will do edit and delete to delete this text that we don't need anymore. And first we will talk about integer variables. Integer, we will have variables x. First we will have just one variable x, and we will define it. We can define it x equals to 3, and how we want to print this variable. We will use printf. We need a text. We will write x equals, and we will need comma and variable x. Now if we just build and run this, we will just have x equals, but we don't have variable x. We need to write a memory allocation for the integer variable, and how we will do it. We will gonna do this inside the text. We will write %d. This is the memory allocation for the integer variable, and we write this variable will be x. And we can use also /n for the new line. If we build and run this, we will have x equals to 3. This is good. And of course we can write some other variables. We can write variable y and variable z. We will have 3 integer variables, and now we can define y equals to 5, for example, and we can define z will be equals to x plus y. Now let's write these variables. Printf, we will write y equals %d new line, and we need variable y, and we will gonna do the same thing for the variable z. Z equals %d /n and variable z. Now let me see the result. As you can see, we have our variables x equals to 3, y equals to 5, and z equals to 8. We defined manually variables x, and also we defined variable y 3 and 5, and we define variable z as an addition of the x and y. But what will gonna happen if we, for example, we can type here x equals to 7, and if we build and run this again, as you can see, x equals to 7, y equals to 5, and z equals to 12. This means these are variables. Variables can be changed. For example, we defined x as 3, and here we redefine it. From this line of code, x will be 7. Of course, y we left the same as it is, and from this line of code, variable x is changed. But for example, if we use, let me cut this, if I change variable x here, and now if I run this, you will see the result: x equals to 3, y equals to 5, and z equals to 8. This happens because we define in this seventh line of code, we define x as 3. We have a variable y, and z is a result of addition of x and y, and we print all of these variables. Then we change variable x here on the 13th line of code, but and this means that from this line of code x will be 7, but until here variable x will be 3, and these are definition of the variables. Now we can comment here, we can type a comment, the same thing as we did in the C++, slash star star slash. Now we will write some double variable. Double x equals to 3.45 d. This is a double variable. We are using double for the real numbers, and of course we have a float, but first let's type a double, and we will have double y equals to 2.77d, and let us and we can also have variable z, but we need to define it as a double. Z equals to, we can do a subtraction, x minus y. And how we gonna write this? We'll write all of these three variables, print f, we'll write x equals, but now we will not gonna use %d. For the double we need to use %, and we need to write lf. This is for the double variable, and we will write comma x, and we will gonna do the same thing for the variable y, lf y. We forgot a new line. And let's do the same thing for the variable z equals %lf and variable z. Okay, a new line. And now let's see how program will work. As you can see, we have x equals to 3.45, y equals to 2.77, and z, of course, z is subtraction of this, of variables x and y. Of course, we have 6 decimals here. We will learn later how we gonna format the decimals, but at this moment we know how to write double variables. And let me just extend this command until here, and we will write some float variables. Float x equals to 7.2f. We are using f for the float variables. Of course, a float is like we have in other languages. Float is also data type for the real numbers, and float y equals to 5.2 f, and if we want to print a float variable, we will just write x equals, and now it will be just %f. And we will have the same thing for the y equals %f and variable y, and we can write /n for the new line. Okay, we don't need variable z now. We'll just have these two variables. As you can see, here are these two variables. Variable x equals to 7.2 and variable y equals to 5.2, which is great. I really hope that you like this tutorial. If you like this tutorial, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on the Instagram. You have a link in the description, and I will see you in the next tutorial.